but for reasons that I hope will become clear later on. So since March 2013, consultants from Cambridge University Press have been training teams of NIS authors and editors to create teaching and learning resources that aim to reflect best practice in active learning and pedagogical design. We have a three-pronged approach to training, which encompasses face-to-face workshops, remote support, and quality assurance reviews. We've recently transitioned from an NIS approach to one which is national first, using the national subject programs to which our books are required to align. The ultimate aim is to create high-quality textbooks and support material to support the new national subject programs with best practices in teaching and learning, and to help turn the intended curriculum, as expressed in the policy documents, into the implemented curriculum as enacted in the classroom. And you certainly don't need me to tell you the core role that textbooks play in educational reform. I don't know if you were just in the room with Timo's, but I think his talk said it all. That well-designed, carefully implemented, high-quality textbooks support teachers and learners to develop engaging, effective learning. And these resources need to embed skills, not just knowledge. In the words of the OECD's Education Director, Andreas Schleicher, the world economy no longer rewards people just for what they know. Google knows everything. The world economy rewards people for what they can do with what they know. The emphasis of the new books, then, is on the application and creative use of knowledge. We want the resources to provide the pupils of Kazakhstan with a toolbox of skills to apply to lots of areas of their life and to make them lifelong learners. But the pedagogy behind the resources isn't what I'm here to talk about today. I want to talk to you about the issues of where and how the resources are made, by whom, how the infrastructure is created and maintained to ensure the sustainability of textbook production, and how the capacity of new fledgling teams can be built fast enough to feed the rapidly evolving education system with these books in real time. Because this project, crucially, like all the projects, has an embedded capacity building remit. And here I'm defining capacity building as assisting an individual or group to gain insights, knowledge, and experiences needed to solve problems and implement change, because that's what we're aiming to do. Our remit, therefore, is not simply to build the capacity of Kazakhstan's school children, but also to build the capacity of the authors and editors too. The two projects have the goal of providing comprehensive textbook resources for 12 subjects at primary level. The subjects you can see here. These 12 subjects are each supported by groups of resources: a teacher handbook, a learner book, and a learner workbook. Some of the language resources also have other supplementary components, like an anthology and a CD-ROM for audio material. Given that the teaching practices and approaches that are supported in the teacher handbook represent a new way of teaching and learning for most teachers in Kazakhstan, the teacher handbook is a vital part of those resources. In our project, we take the approach of working with the authors to write the teacher handbook first, for two broad reasons. Firstly, the support that we must offer to the teachers in using these new, unfamiliar materials is key. This means we cannot risk it being an afterthought. We use it to imagine the best lesson that the resources could possibly be expected to support, and then we distill this perfectly formed lesson into the child-centered learning. The second reason is that the authors that we are working with are inexperienced in writing educational resources, obviously. They are growing rapidly in their skills and knowledge, but we're taking them from a point where they've never written before. We found that when they start from the perspective of the learner, we end up with a string of activities created in a vacuum, upon which to then impose the objectives of the lesson without giving thought to how the lesson may progress from the previous one, how the activities may match the construct, objectives and aims, what the opportunities for differentiation may be, and so forth. We found then that by tackling the teacher handbook at the first stage, and forcing the teams to think of the whole picture of the lesson, not just one activity-based part of it, not only do we end up with better resources, but we also end up with better authors. These authors are then able to write well-designed, well-thought-out resources, work effectively together as a suite of components. You can see this is an example from one of our teacher handbooks, and I'm ashamed to say I don't know what subject it's from, but I think it might be maths. So the teacher handbook is written with as much support as possible in the areas of the introduction and consolidation of core skills, embarkation on new subjects, differentiation with extension and support, consolidation of learning, opportunities for genuinely formative assessment, language support for the trilingual policy, and even classroom management advice. This is to ensure that lessons run as smoothly as possible for both the pupil and the teacher. Simple advice on prior preparation, arrangement of tables and chairs, and how to organise the pupils into teams or pairs can help even the least experienced teachers to deliver the lesson in the way it's intended. Whilst this may seem prescriptive, the beauty of the teacher handbook is that it can be used by different teachers in different ways. Whilst new inexperienced teachers may use it as a step-by-step guide to conducting a successful lesson, more experienced teachers will use it as a springboard, a place to come up with inspiration. They can supplement it with their own resources as they see fit. In high-performing jurisdictions like Shanghai and Singapore, where higher ECD and PISA rankings go hand in hand with high-quality textbook usage, learner books are routinely accompanied by teacher handbooks, and we aim to follow these best practice examples in our NIS tools. The teacher handbooks are fully aligned with the long-term plans and the subject programs. This assists the teachers in steering, of course, through the year's work of learning, but the requirement to align to the themes and the sequence of the learning objectives can sometimes lead to some issues not present, which we'll come on to later. The teacher handbook being written first, this enables the authors to distill the lesson into a fully child-centered learning book, using age-appropriate language and accessible, engaging and relevant activities on colourful and enticing pages to ensure that the child's learning journey is an active and enjoyable one, and to embed vital skills as well as subject knowledge. Learning is set in familiar and real-life contexts wherever possible, and ideas are elaborated through application, so students are learning skills that are relevant and applicable. They can actually then use these in their own lives. The workbooks that we provide help to consolidate learning with carefully structured practice to develop understanding. We just heard in Helen Alance's fascinating talk about cognitive neuroscience how important it is to practice the skills being learned and how curriculum material must be aimed at doing this. And this is exactly what we do with the learner workbook. It's an opportunity to practice, consolidate, and also to become an independent learner. These tasks can be undertaken as homework or in the classroom, but they provide a joined-up pedagogical approach so that there's coherence in the child's learning journey. They're writing consumable books with engaging child-centered activities, and we hope that they will motivate pupils in their independent learning. All these books are written by Kazakhstani authors, and they are edited by Kazakhstani editors. The overall intention of the Cambridge project teams is to train the author and editor teams in multiple skills concurrently in order to create a sustainable project in which the skills to continue publishing these books are left behind in Kazakhstan when the consultants leave, with training then being cascaded down to new teams. So this all sounds pretty perfect, doesn't it? Smooth. You can see the books already available. But like the swan on the lake, the end product hides the considerable time, effort, hard work, and striving that goes into each page. Remember that these resources are being created by people who've never written before, they've never edited before, so they may be excellent teachers themselves, but they've never taught using these methods before, and they've never themselves been taught using these methods. For this reason, I've come to think of this as my onion approach, because like the onion, it's multi-layered. Here's an onion. At the centre of the onion is the training that takes place in the active methods of teaching and learning, and the most suitable pedagogical approaches to teach the skills and content required at the level needed. This is almost in itself a form of teacher training, since before these new authors are able to understand how to write best practice teaching and learning materials, they need to understand the pedagogical approaches that these resources hope to support in the classroom. They also need to be fully familiar with the educational policies and curricula that resources are intended to deliver. Of course, all our authors and editors are, or were in the past, they may not be highly experienced in the teaching practices which these books will be espousing. And we find that for the new authors, much of what we're teaching them in this realm is new for them. So this is a from-scratch program in most cases. The next layer of the onion is the training and publishing skills, those of writing and editing. It's true to say that the project would have been more straightforward if all the resources had been written and edited in the UK by experienced authors and editors and then simply translated into Russian and Kazakh for the pupils and teachers of Kazakhstan. However, this would have failed one of the fundamental objectives of this project, that of capacity building in local teams, and would almost certainly have resulted in content that was clearly not homegrown, with none of the crucial Kazakhstani cultural reference points visible in the content. The only way to ensure that the skills of our writing and editing remain long after our training is finished is to train Kazakhstani teams how to do these things. This way, too, we can ensure that the content in the books is relevant and recognisable to Kazakhstani pupils, reflecting culture, points, and the landscape of their nation. For instance, subjects like world understanding, which was a new one to me and which I found fascinating, would simply make no sense at all not written by a Kazakhstani author, and it would be wrong to try to do this. None of our authors had ever written before, and unfortunately there's absolutely no correlation between being a good teacher and being a good author. In fact, some of the best teachers I've ever met have made dreadful authors, but that's another story. And the process of recruitment has been a very challenging one. At first, excellent teachers were selected and given roles in the authoring teams. But this often proved short-lived, because these teachers, although excellent in the classroom, sometimes proved less able as authors, and schools were sometimes reluctant to let them go at busy times of the year. The process of recruitment then evolved to become more directly focused on finding people with the potential to be good authors. And we're already seeing these people grow and developing their skills and capacity. The same goes for the editors, some of whom are now being made NIS employees to ensure that the investment made in their training gives a long return, with editors less likely to leave the project and choose commitments elsewhere. So the last layer involves the future trainers of the project. If this project is to have long-term success, it must support the creation of textbooks, now and in the future, without the need for Kazakhstan to look to foreign strategic partners for assistance. What we're trying to do is to create a sustainable, high-quality textbook production infrastructure within NIS, so that once the final grade of this round of reform has been published for and the books are in the schools, the subsequent editions and newly developed resources can be written, edited and produced in-house by NIS authors and editors. However, capacities will not simply trickle down through each group of authors and editors naturally. It's for this reason that we've started to add our trainer-trainer element to the program, with lead authors and editors already having been identified and selected to receive additional support in the principles of training their peers and colleagues. This then becomes a sustainable cycle long after the Cambridge training team event. As in high-performing jurisdictions like Shanghai and Singapore, where textbooks are constantly improved and updated after teacher research groups, the books that we're producing are being piloted in 30 schools around the country. As my colleague Elena will explain more in a moment, NIS staff make visits to these schools and receive qualitative and quantitative feedback about the effectiveness of the teaching and learning resources. And the findings are then fed back into our development stages of textbook production, so that adjustments can be made in line with recommendations. But this is not really a pilot for textbooks, remember. This is a pilot for the curriculum itself, and of the textbooks as a means of supporting the delivery of this curriculum in the classroom. And this is where the first challenge comes in. If textbooks are, as two notes suggested, to be an integral part of establishing the policy intentions of a national curriculum, then the curriculum and the subject programs that stem from it must either be stable before the textbooks are published, or there must be less requirement to full alignment to the long-term plans laid out in the subject programs. On many occasions, we have found ourselves having to unpick the effective material and rewrite and re-edit it and redesign it to keep it on track. So for curriculum coherence to be achievable, there needs to be a critical path which must be followed towards textbook publishing, and relatively stable subject programs are a helpful early step. Of course, if we could wait until the final versions of the subject programs were published, that would make things much easier. But this is of course not possible because of the second challenge of the project, which is that of time. The schedule of piloting requires that each new grade be published and ready at the start of each new school year. So we're producing one grade for every subject within a 12-month period on a rolling basis. Now, it's important to remember that this would be a quick turnaround for even the most experienced authors and editors. I've been an educational publisher for 20 years, and 12-month schedules are incredibly tight. Now, when you bear in mind that we're doing this with inexperienced authors and editors, who at the same time are being trained in all the skills from the Onion diagram, as well as in some cases being full-time teachers, you'll perhaps appreciate the enormity of the task. And that's without the complication of things like subject programs. So the speed of the project is such that we end up with, on average, 3 to 4 months of planning and writing, 3 to 4 months of development and editorial, 3 months for design and pre-press, and 1 month for print. We're lucky that the printing is now being done in-country, in Kazakhstan, which significantly reduces the time that's required for this stage. Don't forget that during this time, the authors are also, and editors, are receiving training as well. So that's without even factoring in their day jobs. The one advantage of this lack of time, though, is that it forces us to ensure that the focus of the training is always on building strengths, rather than highlighting what people lack or need. This prevents the project from becoming more of a deficit model, focusing on weaknesses. We know our authors are highly experienced as teachers, as are our editors, and they have a lot to bring to our programme. Our role is to work with that, giving the authors the opportunities to learn from one another, and in the process increase one another's capacities too. These are our authors working together on some of the workshops that we run with them. You can see there's some, I think at one point they were trying to build the Biter tower with dried spaghetti and marshmallows. I'm not sure how successful that was. It looks like fun. Now, of course, there are many other smaller challenges within such a project for which solutions must be found and obstacles overcome. But the dedication and hard work of our author teams and our editor teams, not to mention our translators, and of course the NIS management team, has meant that we've established a very solid and effective working practice for this project, and the results are already starting to show. If you haven't seen them yet, I would encourage you to go into the sports hall and see our published books, which I hope you'll agree are something to be very proud of indeed. The fact that this is not just a textbook publishing programme, but a capacity building project, is what I find most rewarding about the programme. To create these resources out of country would represent a short-term solution to the long-term goals of the education reform. And without capacity building, we would simply be creating dependency. Thus, in using Kazakhstani authors and editors, we create a dynamic and sustainable project for the long-term benefit of the education system in Kazakhstan. The aims and aspirations of the nation, as embodied in the Mangi Il Charter, must be reflected in the education of Kazakhstan's generation of children, of course, but also in the education of Kazakhstan's future textbook authors and editors. The transformation of learning that we hope these textbooks will support is therefore itself multi-layered, building the capacity of pupils, authors, and editors alike. This is what makes the project such a challenge, but it's also what makes it so rewarding. And I and my colleagues are extremely proud to be part of such an important and progressive project. Thank you very much.